Welcome to Artful Optics. In the last video, we learned how to mix neutrals in watercolor. So this time I'd like to introduce you to a 5-step approach of how to make brilliantly colored watercolor portrait using Frida Kahlo as an inspiration. Her portraits are quite magical. So you will need a full palette of watercolors. I will write in the description below the materials that you will need. It's a good idea to tape your watercolor paper to a board, and for step number 1 you will transfer your drawing onto the watercolor paper taped to the board. Use graphite. If you have a graphite stick, it's gonna go faster, or a pencil, and basically just trace over your drawing so that the graphite will transfer onto the watercolor paper. You should have a lightly drawn sketch of your portrait now, and you're gonna use, for step number 2, masking fluid on areas that you want to keep white, and that will give an extra interest to your painting, because the masking fluid will dry and you'll peel it off. No watercolor will ever get onto underneath the masking fluid. You will be mixing your colors on the palette. It's not a spontaneous method of watercolor painting where you drop the paint into the wet surface. This is wet onto dry, so your paper will need to take quite a bit of work. Make sure you have a fairly heavy paper. Step number 3 is building up the layers of pre-mixed watercolors from light to dark. Start with the lighter tones, and usually the yellow or earth tones, some warm light colors are the best for the first layers. So you will be gradually building up the layers with slightly darker tones, and I'm going to try somewhat unconventional colors for the shadows, just to give a portrait a little more interest. Use the brush to soften the edges and make more of a blended look on your shapes. Step number 4, add unrealistic elements to give your painting a fantastical quality. So this should have been done probably in your original drawing, at least to some extent. So I have added melting hair and pearl beads on the face, along with little white flowers. And the rest of the painting is also a little bit unrealistic, and that creates a magical effect. In fact, I used Frida Kahlo because she falls into a category of South American or Central American artists and writers who used magical realism as an inspiration for their art and literature. So the elements that are not exactly realistic are intertwined with a realism. Flowers woven into hair is a purely inspired gesture from Frida Kahlo. And it's also a pleasure to paint flowers. In this case, they're a bit wilted, but it's still an interesting way to combine a flower painting with a portrait. I'm using brilliant colors. Most of these are primaries and secondaries. There's some mixing going on, but you certainly won't see any neutrals in this painting. I'm trying to use very fresh, very bright colors. For step number 5, use complementary colors to create vibrancy and make a bold statement. You'll notice the hair is a warm red and it's contrasted by the bubbly blue headdress that surrounds the flowers. So these are complementary and make a very striking and strong contrast here. Same with the purple of the skin and the yellow of the flowers, and basically you're trying to use colors that will be very vibrant together. When you're finished painting, make sure you let it dry and then peel off the masking fluid using an eraser. You can touch up the little white shapes if you used any, and basically your portrait will be pretty much finished. Remember that whatever I may have intended this as a meaning for this portrait, the viewer brings their own interpretation, and that is why art is so amazing. The meaning of the work is actually a union between what the artist intends and what the viewer sees in it. So I'm hoping you enjoyed this striking watercolor portrait. Please subscribe, please leave comments, please ask questions if you have any, and come back. Thank you.